Hi, my name is Trace Chesser. I'm with USA Cares, but I am a combat veteran, and I went through my transition in 2004 from the U.S. Army into the civilian workforce. And I will tell you, it was quite a transition. Um, there were a lot of pitfalls that came up that I was not prepared for, that I wish somebody else could have shared some of this information. And I will tell you, everything that I talk about throughout this whole course is going to be really, honestly, it's mainly the experiences of hundreds of people going through this similar to yourself. If you're already out and you're a veteran now, well, you've already faced a lot of these challenges. But we wanted to put this together, this workshop, to try to help you with that transition to the civilian workforce. Um, and I know everybody's at a different stage, different time, but this is information that we thought was really important that, again, hundreds of others have went through. And so we're pulling it all together and consolidating it for you. So let me go ahead and start this PowerPoint. So again, I want to remind everyone that you can see it right there at the top. We are recording, and so we want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And you could share this with others if you want to later. But I want to thank University of Louisville MAPS program for allowing me to come in and share information about my transition and what we've learned from others. And again, I'm with USA Cares. I am the CEO here. We work directly with military members, veterans, Guard, Reserve, and help them during some very challenging times. You can learn more about that at usacares.org if you'd like to learn about that. But again, I just wanted to share that with you and let you know why I'm actually here sharing this info. So again, the purpose of this is to actually try to help members that are transitioning or that have already transitioned that face common obstacles and challenges. Um, it amazes me how often I hear some of the same things occurring over and over and over again. And I think that's because we all had similar backgrounds while in uniform. So it shouldn't be surprising that we have similar challenges after getting out. And so this whole presentation was put together to try to just point out a few of those. And hopefully we can help you overcome some of the challenges ahead of time. Another big point here to be made is that the hiring managers and talent acquisition professionals, sometimes they find it challenging to understand what it is that a transitioning service member is trying to explain about their past or what they've done or how it can relate to a civilian job. And that is something that with time and with some practice, it will become easier and you'll better understand how to articulate the right things. And honestly, there's a lot of people, if you're not military, they don't really care about rank. Rank is one of those things that it doesn't matter if you're a retired colonel or if you're a, private first class or, E3 of some sort getting out. A lot of the civilian sector, they may or may not care about that. So you can't rely strictly on, oh, I was and what your rank was in the military when you get out. Because again, if they don't understand it, they would be speculating and it may not be correct. So it may not be beneficial to you anyway. So again, there are a few things here that are goals, and that's what I really focus on. I want everybody to have and understand the mindset of a hiring manager or a recruiter. If you can take yourself out of your situation that you're currently in and going through this and thinking back to all the things with your past, if you can stop for a moment and try to put yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager or recruiter, you're going to be so much more successful. That's the number one goal. If I can have everyone just do that, you will be so much more successful. Some things that you need to know before transitioning. The first thing, looking for a job is a full-time job. I mean, it is. It truly is a full-time job. It takes a lot of time, effort, energy, follow-up, and research. So don't underestimate this process and realize you're going to need to spend a lot of time actually doing this to be successful. And I don't want you to desperately go out and find the first thing and then think, I'll just do that right now and then I'll go to something else. That can make it more complicated and it can be more frustrating for you and more challenging. If a great opportunity falls in your lap, that's amazing. That's awesome. I'm very happy for you. Problem is, that's not the norm. That's not what we normally see. It takes time and it takes energy. So looking for a job is a full-time job. Another thing that I try to tell a lot of the transitioning members from Fort Knox, and let me say this, if you're anywhere else in the country, Fort Knox, it's the home of several high-level commands. So a lot of times it's very senior level people that are transitioning out. And they asked me to come out and present at a lot of the senior leader symposiums or the executive transition assistance programs. And I will tell you, I have to explain this to them. That it's always easier to find a job when you have a job. So if you're in uniform, you have a job. And it's easier to go through this transition without that additional pressure behind you. Plus, the employers, they don't have to wonder, why is there a big gap? Why were you unemployed for X amount of months? And some people are, and that's fine. You know, they may have a reason that they are unemployed for a certain period of time. Just explain it. But I will tell you, overall, it's easier to find a job if you already have a job. Now, on the other hand, if you are a veteran and you've been out for a while and you're in a job, don't quit that job until you find another job. If at all possible, stick with it. It makes it all so much easier, less stressful, less to explain to an employer, and less for them to speculate. Another thing that you need to do, and I've already said it, but I can't say it enough, you need to think like a hiring manager or a recruiter. If you will do that, if you will think like the hiring manager or recruiter and take yourself out of your own personal situation, it's less personal, it's more of a process, it's easier, and you will be more successful in trying to understand what they're going through. And that's what we're going to talk about more throughout this course. There are three questions you need to ask yourself. And if you're still active duty, this applies more than someone who's already out. But this is something I need everyone to always consider. There's three major things. Where do you want to live, or where do you have to live? Is there a situation that you need to live near family members? Maybe you have elderly parents that you're going to have to take care of in the years to come. Or because of children, maybe you need to be in a certain area. So, I mean, first and foremost, you need to figure out, where are you going to live? Where do you need to live? You know, the money, that's always something. I have people bring that up to me all the time. You know, how much money should I ask for? What am I worth? That's something that needs to be considered later. You need to figure out also, what type of work do you want to do? What type of industry do you want to work in? What kind of work-life balance are you looking for? If you served in the military, you probably had a lot of stress. You possibly missed a lot of holidays with family. You possibly had to live a very different lifestyle than anyone in the civilian sector will ever understand. And so you need to think now about, what type of work style, lifestyle do I want to have? And mostly your sense of purpose. That's something that we talk about a lot. And we always think about that sense of purpose, and are you happy doing what you're doing? Because I'm telling you, for most people, you're going to spend a lot longer time in the civilian workforce than you actually did wearing a uniform. So you need to think about that, consider it. It's very important that you feel good about what you're doing. You have a lot to offer. You bring a lot of skills, a lot of talents, But you need to make sure that you feel good about it, because I've seen a lot of transitioning service members go out and take the first job because the salary, or they take the first job because it has a cool title. And then 6 months or less, they're looking for another opportunity because it's not making them happy. They don't feel like they're actually serving a purpose. And so think about that. That's something that I really, really encourage you to examine about yourself before you decide to move on from there. Just to give you an idea why I was asked to present this information, this is just a quick rundown of my experience. So I had a career with the military, career with the U.S. Army, great time. 98% of it was great, and 2% of it is not so great. That was deployments and going overseas and, combat areas. But 98% of it, best experiences of my life. And so a lot of pride, a lot of great times, a lot of great friends. After I got out, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I was having a tough time with the transition myself. The biggest thing for me was loss of sense of purpose. A friend connected me to ITT Technical Institute, so I went to work there, and I ended up eventually becoming a college director there. And it was great, but at the same time, I wasn't feeling that sense of purpose. Well, then Sullivan University contacted me and wanted me to come over there. They gave me a huge promotion, went to work for them, helped them build some systems, processes, dealt with some of the military relations and career services, helping college students get into the workforce. It actually sharpened a lot of my skills and prepared me for where I am today. But again, I was still missing that camaraderie from the military and that friendship that I had with so many others that had served with me. But again, I love them. They were great people. They took care of my family. It was a great time, great experience. I knew I wanted to make some other changes. So I ended up going with a friend of mine, and we started our own executive recruiting company. So that helped to expand my skills and abilities a little bit more. And I also learned how to start a company and how to manage a small company. And so again, another great experience, but once again, I was having an issue with loss of sense of purpose. I knew that there was something missing. And so as time went by, I was introduced to the former chairman of USA Cares, and he asked me to come here and join the team here. Here I am today. I've been here for a while now. I'm the CEO of USA Cares. It's a veteran service organization. You can look them up and you'll learn all about USA Cares and what we do for military. But I was asked to give this presentation because my background, military, working in the civilian workforce, and then now working in a nonprofit, helping veterans and active duty military go through some challenging times and get through them and move on to the next phases of their life. I want to talk quick about some of the threats that we've learned about that are in the business sector. Some of the threats that businesses are dealing with is attracting and retaining the right people. That's a huge challenge for business, and it's very costly, quite honestly. It's hard to find talent that's going to fit the needs of the business. And I mentioned that earlier, that you need to be able to fill that void for that organization. It's not going to necessarily be you get a job because of your past history with the military. So it's really important for you to understand you need to fit their need and you need to fit into their culture as well. Another big threat to business is cost of recruiting. The cost to recruit an individual is very costly, from posting a job to doing the search to you may have to actually hire professional recruiters outside of your organization. I mean, it's very costly. And then you got to think about how many lost hours or lost productivity is occurring while that position is not filled. So again, that's another area that businesses are really struggling with. I mentioned already cultural fit, soft skills. I talked to hundreds of corporations, I talk to lots and lots of CEOs and presidents of companies. And a lot of them will say, hey, I want to hire veterans because they actually have a lot of the soft skills that we're looking for. And I think we can train the technical side. There's a lot of the discipline, working with diverse groups that a veteran can bring. And so they see some value there. But again, unless you're a good fit and they realize it's not going to be a high risk situation, they may not take that chance. The other item there that I've listed, employee retention. Creating an environment to where you can retain employees. That's very important. Again, it stops that cycle of recruitment, which we already talked about is very costly. So it's really important to be able to retain employees. Employers today, they're going to new extremes on trying to create best cultures, best work environments. How can I create better benefits? You know, as far as someone getting into the workforce and being an employee, it's a great time. You're going to see a lot more of the benefits given to you now that we didn't see in the past, because that's what has to occur to retain people. I want you to think about something that I call the hiring cycle and working with recruiters. This is always something that's been a mystery to a lot of people, that they are like, okay, what is going on behind the scenes when you actually are going through this process? You keep thinking, why aren't they calling me back? If you end up sending in a resume and you're fortunate enough that they contact you, why does it take a couple days, 3 days to schedule an interview? Or after you've had an interview, why is it taking so much time afterwards? Again, this is that get into the mindset of a recruiter and understand that process is going to help you to be able to communicate more effectively. It may also make you seem more patient at times, because that's probably the greatest mistake I see a lot of veterans and transitioning service members. They make that mistake of they think it should happen on their timeline. They think that everyone should be moving quicker. There's a lot of things going on in corporations whenever a recruiter is actually going through this process. On the screen, you'll see, you know, this arrow, and I've listed some items that are steps in the recruiting process, like initial screening of candidates or phone interviews, face-to-face interviews. Second and third interviews are very common. And that can be frustrating for service members because they, you know, we're accustomed to decisions being made more quickly and decisive. And that's not always the case in the civilian sector. Sometimes they want to make sure that all groups involved approve of a person before they actually send them an offer. You'll notice some of the other areas, behavioral assessments and background checks, and then sending offer letters and then notifying. Well, below each one of those, you're going to see a number. And so what I've done is I've said, okay, when you have a single, we call them requisitions, when you have a single request to fill a job, you may get 100 applicants just from the initial screening. Like you post one job and all of a sudden you got 100 applicants applying. That's not uncommon. Right now, with the current environment, there's not that many people applying. So that number may be slightly inflated, but I will tell you, in those other times when it's harder to recruit, or it's harder to find a job, it's harder to find a job, that number will actually be higher. So let's just go to that and say one position, you have 100 applicants who apply to a job. Now, again, reverse this. You are the recruiter. So you got to think about, this is what I'm going through day in, day out as the recruiter. So you have to do initial screenings. You have to review resumes. You may do a questionnaire with them. You may actually just set up something to do. There's a lot of technology out there now to where they can use equipment to do virtual screenings. And so that initial screening process, that's that first sweep through and identify the top candidates to move forward. Well, let's say out of that 100, 10 candidates are identified. And of those 10 candidates, you're going to do phone interviews, or you may actually call them in to do face-to-face interviews. Well, you do that, and then you identify, we'll say, the top 5 for second and third interviews. And then, as you can see, it continues to move on. Behavioral assessments, now you're down to 3. And then maybe out of that initial 10 that you interviewed, you're going to make an offer to 1. Well, that's kind of a hiring cycle. That's to give you an idea what a recruiter is dealing with. But what most recruiters are dealing with, it's pretty common when instead of that 1 job, they have on average 30 openings. And so now they're trying to do this times 30. And I'm going to quickly switch here, and you'll see those numbers down at the bottom. Now that initial screening process turned into 3,000. The actual interviews turned into 300. And you can see how that trend keeps going. Think about if that's your day in and day out job. Again, veterans or military members, we're accustomed to things being made, like decisions being made more decisively. And we don't like to sit and dwell on things. We make a decision and we move on. Well, that's not always how it works in the civilian workforce. And if you understand that, and now if you think about what is a recruiter going through, that gives you an idea. Their day is filled with initial screenings and phone interviews. And so you went through this process, and let's say you were that individual that made it through the first 3 steps, and you did a second or maybe a third interview. And now you're waiting for that recruiter to call you back. Well, think about what they're going through, how many people they have to reach out to, how many people they have to contact. And I'll tell you, I've had dozens, I'll just say dozens of service members call me and express their frustration about, I had an interview and it's been 3 days and they haven't called me. And then the 4th day, they're even more frustrated. And there's really nothing wrong. Like, I may have actually been talking to that company and I know what's going on. And so maybe it's not anything dealing with your skills or abilities. Maybe it's just they're overwhelmed. But then it suddenly becomes personal and you become frustrated and you start emailing a couple times a day, or you call and you leave voicemails. You know, I'm just checking back to see if there's anything else. Can you see how that could become frustrating? You don't intend for it to, but the reality is that person on the other end may be a hiring manager, may not be a recruiter, maybe the person actually hiring for the position, and they're overwhelmed because of all the work they're doing. So again, this is something to think about and consider. And that's something that a lot of service members have told me. I never thought about it. I never realized that's what's going on. We can't let anxiety drive us to the point that we just consistently keep trying to call and contact and try to move the process ourselves. You just have to trust the process and try to make sure that you're doing the best job you can. In the next session on June 7th, we're going to talk more about resumes and cover letters. And we'll talk more about how to develop them. I don't want to spend much time. I'm going to put a couple things up here to talk briefly about it, to let you know it's really important. But the next session on June 7th, we'll really dig into that quite a bit more. I have my friend here, Paula Redding, that is the Director of Career Transition. If in case I can't be available that day, she may be talking to you about this. But Paula is, she's had a long, extensive career in talent acquisition. We work together on a lot of things, and we've helped hundreds of veterans and service members obtain employment. So Paula is as qualified, probably more qualified than I am. So if you're fortunate enough to have Paula in my place, or we do it together, then that's going to be better for you anyway. So, but yeah, just talking quickly about this. Resumes are one of these things that everybody has an opinion about it. They want to see it the way they want to see it. And I've had a lot of experts look at a resume and say, that's perfect. And then a veteran will take it and show it to somebody else and they'll say, no, 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 that's all wrong. You need to change this and change this. And then suddenly they change it again. And then they show somebody else and it's the same thing. Change it all. And so what I want to tell you is a resume really, it's only to get you in the door. It's to get you that, for them to take that moment to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a chance and meet with this person. So don't overthink the resume so much that you spend so much time dealing with that you don't even think about the entire process. Remember I showed you the hiring cycle? The resume is just to get you past that initial screening. On the screen here, you'll see that there's an example of a resume on the right. I surveyed hundreds of employers about what is it that they're looking for in a resume. And we had some people that they had their resume formatted in a certain way and they would get interview after interview after interview, and then suddenly they're hired. Then we had other people that would never get an interview and we couldn't figure out why. And so we started identifying some of the things. And again, when we go over this in that next session on June 7th, we're going to talk more about it, but I'll tell you, resume, 1 to 2 pages. That probably contradicts anything that you've heard from transition assistance programs when you're getting out of the military. But I'm going to tell you, employers and hiring managers do not have the time to sit and read through a 5-page resume, which a lot of us, when we got out and you went through transition assistance program, we ended up coming out of there with a 3, 4, 5-page resume. Civilian employers do not have time. So 1 to 2 pages, you're just trying to get their attention and you're trying to get them to give you that moment to come in and speak with them about your skills and abilities. That's all you're looking for. The summary of experiences at the top, it's important, but if you are too broad and you start talking about all these different terms about, providing, all this experience, but you're not clear in what areas, that can actually be a deterrent from interviewing someone. I've read the summaries or executive summaries, they're called different things. I've read some that after I read it, I'm like, I don't have a clue what you're trying to do. It's like it's so broad and they try to throw in so many words that it actually can become confusing. So we always tell people, make sure that your executive summary, your summary, that it's clear, it's concise, and it makes sense about who you are and that you're trying to obtain employment in a certain area. In the section down below that, you'll see bullets there. We always tell people, identify the key words that are used in the civilian sector that relate to the job field that you're trying to get employment in. There are a lot of tools that are being used today that actually help to filter that out, even before a human being gets that. So these tools will sometimes, you can enter in, like Paula may post a job and she'll type in key areas that she's really looking for. And so those key words that she's identified or talking about in there may be the key words that are used in a search to identify the top candidates if you have too many and if you're using certain types of recruiting software. It's almost like it grades your resume versus the job posting. And it determines, are you the best match or not so much? And so it's really important that you Do some research ahead of time. Figure out what the jobs are that you're thinking you're most qualified for, and see if you can identify keywords that are being used. Make sure you're using those in yours. And these areas here with the bullets, that's the perfect place to put them. Paul and I have asked a lot of employers, on average, when you're posting a job and you're getting a bunch of resumes, how long do you spend reviewing a resume to determine whether or not if you want to interview? And I'll tell you, we've heard 30 seconds, we've heard 20, I've heard as low as 15 seconds. Within 15 seconds, they'll make a decision whether or not to move forward. And so think about it. If you're spending all this time and you've got several pages, in 15 seconds, are they ever going to get to the second page? Probably not. So it's important to be able to hit them up front in the first few seconds to make sure that the keywords are being used. And then that way it will intrigue them, it will excite them, and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to take a moment, I'm going to look at this one again later, and probably bring them in for an interview. Bringing you in for an interview is really what a resume is for. After that, it's all up to you. It's all up to your ability to meet with someone, and do they like who they're meeting with? Do they feel like, hey, I'd really like to see them at work every day? Do I connect well with them? Do they connect well with the team? So again, the resume is only as good as getting you in the door, and then it's up to you. But you want to make sure that your resume is clean and it's direct and it's not confusing, and you're not using a bunch of military acronyms that no civilian understands. And if you're using a lot of military rank in your resume, that's not helpful either. I know that does not make sense to a lot of you, but that's not helpful in a lot of cases, because if they don't know what your rank is, how are they going to try to figure out, are you compatible for the job that they're posting? You want to make sure that your resume is tailored for each position, and make sure that it is geared towards what it is their major pain points are and why they're even trying to hire someone. And one area that we seem to have had a lot of problems with, make sure that you're using a professional email address, that you're not making up crazy terms like I killed them all at yahoo.com. Don't be using anything. I mean, I've only seen that a few times, but still, the fact that I saw it, it was so shocking that I mention it now quite often to service members. Make sure you're using a professional email address. It's not common, but again, it happens. So I just want to throw that out there. Don't use different types of fancy font. Make sure that you try to use common font. Your personal information, you don't need your address on there. That's something in the past that they used to say put address in there. Now it's not important, and especially because sometimes there's remote work. I'm going to keep moving here. Again, we're going to have a whole session where we talk about this, but one of the things, once you create a resume and it's in a Word document, convert it over to PDF. Because when you email and you send that resume, you want to make sure that it isn't jumbled up or something happens. If it's in a PDF format, it'll stay the same, and that's perfect. LinkedIn. I'm going to get through here really quick talking about LinkedIn because it's so important. You need to build a professional network. You need to connect with people at companies and corporations that maybe you would like to be with. The fact is, the majority of the people who are obtaining jobs, they're doing it through a network. It's not something that you're just going on and blindly applying to a job. As a matter of fact, I was told that just going to a company's website and applying to a job and trying to get that job through that source and not knowing anyone there it's very unlikely that you actually obtain the job. I actually heard the number is as little as 4% actually obtain employment through just blindly applying to jobs. And that's probably a frustration that a lot of you have had. You've applied to jobs, you know you're qualified, and you're not getting a call. Again, think about what the recruiter is going through. Think about what they're looking for. What are the key words? And they may already have candidates in-house that they're working with. So you really have to be careful with that. You need to make sure that you're concise, but you have to have a network, and you have to expand that network to be able to get in a lot of cases, just to have an actual shot at an interview. Pull this information a couple years ago, but I know it's still pretty consistent. Recruiters using LinkedIn on the hiring process is about 94%. It's almost all recruiters today are using LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, that's going to be hard. That's not to say they won't bring you in to interview you, but I will tell you, most are making some snap decisions based on your social media. And you see on there, 65% of the recruiters surveyed say they use Facebook, 47% Twitter. I actually think those numbers are higher now. I actually think that recruiters are looking for more efficient ways to recruit and move people through the process. And so social media is a huge part of the process when it comes to getting hired in the civilian sector. So you may want to go and do your own research and see if you find that to be the same, and see if it's really that important. You may want to go ahead and start creating a couple of profiles if you don't already have some. If you do have them, excuse me, you do have them, think about what it is that a recruiter may be looking at. So that's something else to consider as well. I threw up a screenshot of my LinkedIn profile. I mean, just use professional photos. Try to make sure that it's not something that looks like selfies, or don't use your military photo. Your, Department of Defense promotional photos, very professional, you're wearing a uniform, but quite honestly, in most of those photos, at least in all of mine, I didn't seem very approachable. I mean, it was a whole different intention when we used those photos. In the civilian sector, again, people will hire people because they like them more often than you would believe. They'll actually choose someone who is a really good cultural fit to join their team over someone who's very qualified, maybe overqualified, but they don't get that feeling like they're going to mesh well with the team. I guarantee you they'll hire someone who is a better cultural fit than somebody who's a true technician that doesn't fit in well. So make sure that everything you do, that you seem to be approachable, that it's something that you would, if you saw it, would you want to work with yourself, quite honestly. There are a lot of tools on LinkedIn that help you prep for interviews. So go on there and look at some of the job tools. You'll see a lot of the areas where that they have different types of preparation tools. They even have like questions that are commonly asked. It's a lot of great tools there. So take time. And if you are a military member or an active duty military or a veteran, you possibly qualify for a year-long Premier account. And so that's something that you need to look into, because we found out for a lot of military members, and they love for us to get on LinkedIn. So they'll offer those premium accounts for free for a year. So, I mean, if it's free, you might as well explore it. You might as well see if it's something that will benefit you. But whenever you do, don't forget to go onto the job section and look through a lot of the tools that are there that could help you. Connecting with professional recruiters. I bring this up because a lot of people do not realize there's different categories for recruiters. There are corporate recruiters that are hired full-time employees with a corporation. That's their sole purpose and their sole job. They recruit for that company. You'll also hear something that's called third-party agencies or firms, recruiting firms. That's a company that does nothing but recruiting for several other companies. And they contract that company to actually go out and search for people for them. You remember I said that I started a company with a friend of mine after I worked at Sullivan University? Well, that's what I created, was a third-party recruiting firm. And so other companies would hire us and pay us to search for people that they didn't have time for, to do a search for, and they would possibly spend more money and time spending or sending other recruiters to recruit for it. So they would hire us, they pay us a fee, we go and do the search. And there's also types of hiring agreements. Some of you may have heard the term that you're going to be a contractor. That may be a 1099, so you're not a full-time employee with the company. So you need to know about the different types of agreements that third-party firms may have. They're direct hire, so that means a third-party group could hire you directly for that company, and that's it. They're paid, they found you, you're hired, you go to work for them now. That's it, it's over. That's called direct hire. Temporary hire may be for a temporary amount of time. Maybe they need to hire someone for 180 days, and they know that contract's going to be over at that time. So you just need to know there are different types of recruiting and different types of agreements. And again, I mentioned the contract to hire. That's something where they bring you in, you're a contractor for X amount of time, say it's 180 days, then you may be brought on full time, just like a direct hire at that point. So this is something that if you have time, go back and look up terms like direct hire, temporary hire, contract to hire. I'm throwing this up on the screen because this is a program that if you're still active duty military, there are programs like DoD Skill Bridge, or there are career skills programs. So career skills programs is primarily with the U.S. Army. DoD Skill Bridge means that it's all branches. We help to manage the program here at the Fort Knox area. We're in Louisville, Kentucky. We help to manage, and we have an agreement with the Department of Defense, specifically Department of the Army, out of Fort Knox, and we manage a program. So there are a lot of programs that are out there, like this one is a senior leader program that you need to be E7 or above, or a captain or above to qualify to get in this program, but you're under your 180 days. We're going to tell you, we want you to be right there, right at that point when you're getting out, so that when you finish the program, you could go straight to work. But the technical rule is 180 days before you get out. So we have a partnership with a lot of corporations, and we take people that are on active duty and assign them for 8 weeks to go through a fellowship program with different companies. I mention this to you because I don't know where you are in the US. If you were going to come to Louisville, Kentucky, and it doesn't matter which branch of service you're in, you could go through this career skills program and get assigned in like an internship for 8 weeks with the company. And then that will probably lead into you getting an actual offer to be hired, as long as you do it close enough to your time that you're going to ETS. If you're already out and you're a veteran, unfortunately, you can't use these types of programs. You have to still be in. But I just wanted to tell you, for those of you that are still in service, keep an eye out for these types of programs, because there are a lot of great ones across the country. We love our program. It's got a lot of high reports. Paula manages this. It's had over a 90% employment rate. So Department of Defense, everyone else loves the program. We love the program. But again, if you're at another military installation and you're getting out, you need to go to your education center and ask them about DoD Skill Bridge or career skills programs, because they're going to have them there as well. May not be this one, but again, just check into that, because that's a very valuable resource. I wish that I had had whenever I was getting out. Last thing I'm going to talk about, terminology. In civilian sector, there's kind of a cross up sometimes, and we've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to go through this pretty quick. But in the military, we talk a lot about human resource. That means something different in the military than it does in the civilian sector. In the military, it's the primary management of personnel, equipment, and so we call it human resources. In civilian sector, human resources could be dealing with things for an organization to ensure that the employees are taken care of, and they have everything that they're entitled to, and that they have someone there to advocate for them if they ever needed it. They're also involved with the hiring process, and you'll see there it talks about workers' compensation, succession planning, benefits enrollment, FMLA. Those are things in the military we don't deal with. So if you're a transitioning service member and you're thinking human resources like we know it in the military, and you're sitting here at Paula, that's a human resource professional in the civilian sector, and we're talking about all this human resource skills and abilities that we have, and she's looking at us saying, what do you know about FMLA? Well, it can be a very uncomfortable conversation because it gets confusing. Human resources, civilian sector versus military, it is different. So make sure you understand that. A lot of times I ask service members who are transitioning out or they're already out, I'll say, what do you want to do, or what areas do you feel you're most skilled in? And a lot of people, especially senior leaders, they'll tell me operations. You need to be more specific, because I'm telling you, operations in civilian sector doesn't always make sense. Are you talking about financial operations, human resource operations? So, I mean, just the term operations does not equate to one single area in civilian sector. So that's something that you really need to keep an eye on. And leadership, we talk a lot about leadership in the military. In civilian sector, a lot of times if someone will say, I need to talk to the leadership of my company, they may be talking about the C-level, the corporate leaders of that organization. So while you're talking about skills, abilities, traits, you know, your ability to lead people, that term in the civilian sector is a description of a specific group that is the leadership of a company. So again, you got to think like a recruiter. You got to be able to think about what it is that they're processing, and you can't get frustrated because they don't know and understand you. So it's really important. The perception of hiring managers. I've had a lot of people talk about, you know, when they ask, what can you do or what do you bring to our organization? Because remember, you got to bring something of value to fill that need for them to want to hire you and pay you. So again, if you start saying, you know, I bring a lot of leadership. Well, are you suggesting that that company or that corporation does not have proper leadership when you're saying that? Because I've actually had a lot of hiring managers that say they were slightly offended when an individual is interviewing and they keep talking about their leadership skills and abilities. They didn't mean anything by it, but it's just the way that it came across. So be careful when you're talking about what you bring to a company, because you could give that hiring manager that perception that you believe that you can provide excellent leadership and that maybe the leadership they currently have is not effective. Talking about providing change and being able to correct things and being able to be a change manager, that's not a good thing in a lot of cases because they don't even know you. And how do you know everything in that company is broke to begin with? So if you're coming in there talking about how you can bring change or you can create more SOPs and you can do this and you can do, remember that may be insulting as well. Sounds like common sense right now, but I'm telling you, I've had this conversation hundreds of times with service members that's going through the transition. talking about improvements and policies and procedures, and impacting culture. I can impact culture. Well, you have to fit into their culture, not them fit into yours. And so it's really important for you to think about how you're coming across to hiring managers in the civilian sector. I throw this up here to just say, there are a lot of ways that you could get out of giving your position title that I'm a company first sergeant and I'm this, or I'm a company commander, battalion commander, whatever. You can actually use terms like manager, senior manager, program manager. So you probably need to spend a lot of time taking all these military terms and converting them to something that equates to the job and to what the hiring manager or the recruiters understand. Paula will tell you she spends, and when she gets on here, she'll probably tell you she spends 2 to 3 hours with each service member trying to help them just get their resume corrected. It's quite a process. So that's something else to consider. This last screen, I just want to mention USA Cares. The reason that I'm here is we provide assistance under emergency situations. We provide post-service skills training. So in extreme situations, when veterans are being evicted, thrown out of their home, sending their kids away to go live with someone else, they have no food, no utilities. That's what we're dealing with here. But we know that we help to improve the quality of life for our veterans and their families and reduce factors that can contribute to veteran suicide. So I think it's really important to try to help people get through some difficult times. I hope that you're not going through those same challenges, but I wanted to mention that's why I'm where I am today. And this goes right back to the beginning when I was talking about a sense of purpose. I feel like I have a sense of purpose now. And I think it's an absolute honor to be able to work with our nation's warriors, our veterans, and help them. Sometimes it's just advice, or maybe it really is that situation that the sheriff's there about to kick them out on the street. We think that it's really important to be able to provide that support. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what all you've done for our country. Be patient. Transition is difficult. Make sure that you're finding that sense of purpose that makes you happy. That's the most important thing. The dollars and cents is not going to be what makes you happy. It's going to be feeling good about what you're doing and giving back to others. It's going to really give you that same sense of purpose that we felt wearing a uniform. And so again, I can't stress that enough. Civilian employers will pay and compensate what they need to for a position to maintain and keep an employee, a good employee. So money's going to be there. It's going to come. Don't make all your decisions. And again, 3 times today, I had to have this conversation with senior leaders getting out of the military. If you're chasing the dollars and cents, chances are you're not going to be happy. Make sure that you find something that provides you a sense of purpose and take care of your families. And understand that a transition out of the military is exactly that. It's transition. And it takes time. Be patient. And find a battle buddy to talk to and work through the process. So again, thank you so much for joining me here. And just want to see, does anyone have questions? I don't know if you want to type them into the chat. We only have a couple minutes left. If there's no questions, I'll stay on here for a few more minutes, but thank you for your time this evening. We look forward to seeing you on June 7th when we're talking more about resumes and cover letters.